This is one module in a 21-part series that the York Group has developed to provide guidance on key elements of a cloud business model, and I would encourage you to spend time going through the rest of the series. Is this really the right time for you to make a big commitment to the cloud? Microsoft and other vendors are certainly putting a lot of pressure on you to do it. The big vendors are all pushing the cloud. The cloud is wondrous. The cloud is magical. The cloud is a miracle. And to explain how much of a miracle it is, I've brought along a brilliant engineer to provide his input. Yes, Dilbert, I'll let you read that for yourself. But that is a promise of the cloud, isn't it? It's big, it's fast, it's cheap, it's easy. We will be able to do everything in the cloud. Develop our products, do sales and marketing, provision and support the solution. The miracle of the cloud is supported by the analysts. Because it is so big, so fast, so cheap, so easy, companies are standing in line to throw money at cloud solutions, right? In fact, according to IDC, spending on the cloud in 2014 was $100 billion worldwide, so clearly a huge market opportunity. And yes, the $100 billion is a big number in absolute terms, but it still represents only 5% of the overall spending. So while there is a lot of interest in the cloud, the spending levels are surprisingly low. So the big question is, how can the adoption figures used by analysts be so different from the actual spending? When you read the headlines from analysts, you see big numbers thrown around. 60% of corporations are using cloud applications, or 75% are planning to use cloud applications, blah, blah, blah. I think that one of the main reasons is that surveys are done with individuals within a company and don't always reflect the corporate policy towards the cloud. When surveying individuals, the question is often, are you in the cloud? Or are you using cloud technology? And at the individual level, cloud adoption is very high. The logos on this slide are just some of the cloud technologies used by individuals, sometimes for their own personal benefit, sometimes for business purposes, but they don't involve big spending by the company. There is definitely a disconnect between the perceived adoption by large corporates and the actual spending. So, where is the disconnect? Nephophobia is a real word that means fear of clouds, and this is what we often see in the corporate market. There are many barriers to adoption by the enterprise market. The first and foremost is security. Whether it is personal information or product information, companies have been reluctant to store information outside their firewall. This is changing, and the rapid adoption of Office 365 is a good indication that corporate attitudes are evolving. IT departments sometimes see the cloud as a threat to themselves. Decisions on buying SaaS solutions are increasingly being made by lines of business or functional areas within a company, such as marketing, reducing IT's role and importance. For real-time applications, latency is an important consideration. One of the main benefits of SaaS for an ISV is the fact that it is highly standardized and all of your clients will be on the same code base and version of the product. But for larger companies, this can actually be a disadvantage because they like to customize applications to work with their own processes and workflows. The perception is that SaaS solutions are cheaper than on-premise, but this is not always the case for larger companies. In most cases, they already have a large data center and their own IT staff. If the SaaS offering is simply a replacement of functionality, on-premise can actually be cheaper. I'll come back to this a little bit later. Companies are also concerned about getting locked in with the vendor. How do they get their data back or transfer it to another SaaS application if they decide to switch? And directly tied to that concern is the concern about vendor viability. If the vendor of an on-premise software goes out of business, the company still has the application running on their system and there's no immediate business disruption. But if a SaaS vendor goes out of business, they may no longer have access to those applications. And for companies outside the US, the Patriot Act is a big issue. I discussed this in more detail in the webinar on legal issues, but the Patriot Act gives the US government the right to access personal information on foreign nationals if the data resides on a data center owned by a US company or the subsidiary of a US company. This is a major barrier to adoption around the world, even in countries like Canada and Australia. So, why bother? If the spending is so low and there are so many barriers to adoption, why not just wait for the market to really take off? The primary reason is because customers and prospects are asking for cloud options. They are increasingly shortlisting only vendors and partners who can offer both. So even in cases where they are pretty sure they want on-premise and ultimately buy on-premise, you have to have a viable story to tell in order to get invited to the table. Yes, today's market is still quite small, but the underlying growth and planning that is taking place under the water surface is impressive. I've been working with large industrial software companies such as Schlumberger, Siemens, GE Healthcare, and others, and you would be amazed at the effort and investment that is being made, even with companies that don't have a cloud offering today. It really is a question of when it is going to happen, not if it is going to happen. Perhaps the biggest reason to move to subscription model business is the fact that companies with recurring revenues are worth a lot more than those that don't. This may not be entirely logical, but the reality is that investors place a big premium on the predictability of recurring revenues. Yes, enterprise spending on cloud technology is still in the early growth phase, but this means that the upside opportunity for companies that provide cloud solutions is enormous. The York Group helps ISVs and services companies that want to expand their cloud business. Our website offers a wide range of resources that you can access at no cost. And if there's anything we can do to help you, feel free to give me a call or send me an email.